What's your Twitter handle again?
It's SAHIL C and the number zero. So Sahil C zero.
Okay.
Yeah, the numbers always get annoying.
Boom. We're live, buddy.
All right. Awesome.
Sahil, how's it going, man?
Doing well. Yeah. Can't complain too much. I guess I'm fortunate to have like an income right now. just yeah, Bitcoin sort of gives us all hope. I think that's pretty fair to say. I don't know.
100%, man. 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think without Bitcoin, we'd all, especially in light of the last few months, we'd all be in far worse condition, just on our outlooks on things. So you're in California, right?
Yeah, I'm actually in the Bay Area, so San Mateo-ish peninsula area. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was looking at your Twitter profile,
Mhm.
and what kind of work do you do out there?
Yeah, so I'm a designer. It's not really a Bitcoin company. It's like an enterprise company like that. But yeah, I'm a product designer. So I do flows, user interface, product management type stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot
Cool.
of that can be brought over to Bitcoin for sure. So
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Are you hoping to make that transition at some point?
100% at some point. Definitely in the near future. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I'm so excited to see just the kind of tidal wave of talent that moves over to the space. Like, let's say if the price predictions that get kind of propagated on Twitter are accurate and the next bull run is in some kind of range of what's being talked about, there's going to be so much more capital in the space, so many more companies entering the space, so much more economic activity, I guess, of all kinds. And all those people who had been waiting on the sidelines, not because they wanted to, but because there's not that many opportunities in the space right now. All those people are just going to jump right in, and we're going to have. It's one of the things that I always we've talked about it on the podcast before, and that excites me so much is, they're not just coming to be involved in kind of like the next hot industry, but they have like a strong ideological reason for being there as well. And you combine the two, right? You give someone an ability to make a living in something that they're so passionate about, and just like crazy fuel for the fire on all that.
Totally. And I think there's a lot of people who are and I think it applies to me as well. Like you start off with the number go up, and then you start to go down the rabbit hole, and then you learn about Austrian economics and all that kind of stuff. And I'm seeing that personally in my friend group and in my social and coworker group as well. It's wild. There's a lot of smart people. Yeah.
And like, so you've got a lot of people around you who are into Bitcoin as well.
So I guess you could say, like many other people, I'm the Bitcoiner in the in the community, but there's definitely a lot of people who, especially with what's going on now in the macro climate, people are like, what's happening? Maybe I should look at this fixed, immutable, hardest asset in the history of humanity. So yeah.
Man, it's always like, what is it that presumably you're all in, your coworkers, colleagues, social group, you're all probably on an equal kind of footing in terms of intellect and, what is it? Why aren't they into it? I guess is my question. If you went down the rabbit hole and you kind of pursue different forms of knowledge to understand this thing better, why do you think, the people that you interact with a lot, and presumably you talk about this stuff too a lot, what do you think is the kind of the barrier for them?
Yeah, personally, I think this is something that applies to Bitcoin, but could apply to any topic, right? I think you need that initial hook. So for me, when I found out about it, I was already sort of a libertarian leaning mindset. So for me, that it just sort of clicked immediately. I was a privacy oriented libertarian. But for other people, it may not be that. For other people, it may be, anti-corporate, blah, blah, blah. So I think you just need to find out what the hook is for the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I've been sort of, learning that as I go along, and I'm talking to more people and refining my pitch.
What what's the kind of the perception of libertarians in especially the Bay Area these days? Because the impression that everyone in the outside
Mhm.
world gets is that it's super left leaning and it's that kind
Mhm.
of a culture. What kind of response do you get for being a open libertarian?
Libertarian. Yeah, yeah. I think socially, people are definitely more open, left leaning, so that kind of works well. Um, I think in some areas, depending on where you go, especially Oakland, San Francisco, there's a lot more. I guess you would call them more hardcore left leaning people, but
Right.
there's definitely a lot of libertarians, especially if you look at old school Silicon Valley, Paul Graham, Naval Ravikant, people like that. There's a lot of people who look up to them as influence, and they get that like libertarian mindset from that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Is there like what's the sense on the street that because I spoke with someone a couple weeks ago that was in the Bay Area as well. And he was kind of suggesting that there was a fairly noticeable exodus happening right now
Mm.
for, I guess young professional sort of types. Are you noticing that?
Yeah, so I guess I'm sort of in two minds. On one hand, you see, especially what's happening recently with like Twitter and I guess Facebook, they're saying, hey, you could kind of work from home. So I guess on one hand, you would guess people are going to start moving out. But on the other hand, part of me, the contrarian, is kind of like um, people still want to be around other people who are um, either think similarly or are perceived to be intelligent in some way or are working on the same startups or companies and stuff like that. I think that's still going to exist. And
Yeah.
that's probably an unpopular opinion right now, is my guess.
And what do you make of kind of, and to the degree that the spotlight is on certain places for other politically motivated reasons, I don't know, but what do you make of kind of that area being kind of a center for some of the more obvious problems that this system is bubbling up, and also some of the more perhaps aggressive reactions to those problems?
I guess if you're sort of alluding to like taxation and stuff, is that sort of what you're leaning
Well, I
towards?
just mean the homelessness problem has been gotten a lot
Yeah,
of press, and then the um I guess riots and protests and stuff like that has
yeah,
gotten a lot of press there, and the response to that, and Nancy Pelosi and her
yeah.
shenanigans and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm sort of hoping that in the long run, things sort of work out and people see like, hey, this is kind of not working. And they'll look at other places. I really hope things turn around here because I love the weather. I love Northern California. So, but yeah, I think it's just, I hope it's a matter of time. Because I mean, if you look at it, like I said, when the Silicon Valley first started, it wasn't super hard left leaning. It was definitely libertarians. From my understanding, startup people who were like, government is incompetent. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to not ask for permission. We're going to start companies. So I hope that comes back at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, why don't you tell me what your, kind of Bitcoin rabbit hole story was? How did
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and you said you came in kind of for the pump, but how did you come across it the first time, and what was the impetus that put you down the rabbit hole?
So actually, kind of for the pump, but not really. So this is kind of interesting. I was taking a class in college. So I studied computer science in Amherst, so other side of the coast,
Yeah.
University of Massachusetts. And I wanted to take a computer science class, and I saw blockchain something something, and I was like, okay, it's kind of cool. And I think over the summer I started just Googling, and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I was like, oh, this is kind of makes sense. And I think I saw a video from three brown, one blue, or something like that, and he was explaining how proof of work works, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And I guess like everyone else, you read the white paper and blah blah blah. So that was like the okay, there's something here. There's something here. And then from there, you kind of read Andreas Antonopoulos and all that stuff.
And that was in what year?
That was I think 17 or 18, probably the end of 17 or the beginning of 18.
Okay, so
Yeah,
around the
not that
time there
far.
was a lot of frenzy and hype and stuff.
Yeah, so
And
definitely 17. I was like, this is a scam. 17, I was like, this is a scam. And after that, I was like, okay, there's something going on.
and did you veer down any other crypto
Yeah.
roads before coming back to Bitcoin?
Yes, I was. So I was going to say, while I was looking up on YouTube, I think YouTube is there's a lot of not so great stuff on YouTube.
Oh, there's so much shit
Yeah,
on YouTube. It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I went down, not for too long though. In my defense, not for too long. I think I went down Ethereum, Monero, just for a little bit. I was like, okay, there's something there. But I think the more and more I stuck to like first principles, and I was like, okay, what do we need in a decentralized system? The most important thing is security. That's like decentralization, security. If you don't have that, what's the point?
Yeah.
So that's sort of when I was like, okay, I need to tune everything else out.
Yeah, man, I think everyone at least had some exposure to YouTube, crypto YouTube from 2017. And I guess in some capacity it still exists today. And it's just so different, like the quality of the discourse and like the content that's being put out. It's so different than what you find on Bitcoin Twitter or in podcast land, And I wish, as great as Andreas won, I have two gripes with Andreas. One, he always, I could tell he was a sincere person. Obviously, he knew what he was talking about. He was incredibly passionate about it. And I was totally scooping up everything that he was putting out. But one of the things he said was always like, don't invest, learn about it and educate yourself. And like, I think by and large, most people take things most seriously when they do have a bit of skin in the game, right? As has been so often said. Not that you need to go out and put your life savings in it, but at the end of his talks, I'd love it if he said, now leave this room tonight and go buy $10 worth of Bitcoin and start learning more, because the investment side of things from his perspective wasn't at all really a part of his shtick. He was coming at it from an entirely different angle. And on the other hand, I see these videos today. I saw one the other day, and like this account had 500,000 subscribers, and they were talking about all these different, I don't even know the names of them, but like you got to diversify your portfolio, and there's Bitcoin and this and that. And I just wish there was more, I guess, maximalist content on YouTube. So that because when people come across it, like it sounds kind of reasonable. Diversify, these things do different things for whatever. And I'd love it if, you had like an American Hodl type character, like on YouTube who could just be like, no, don't even fucking think about it. All right. Listen, there's only one. That's the only thing you should be focused on. Go scoop some up right now. Your opportunity of buying some is like, shrinking with each passing day. Go get some and study your ass off and learn about it. Forget everything else.
This is a call to action to American Hodl right now. He's on Twitter. He's on Instagram. I bet he's on Facebook. Like, just get on YouTube. We need you. We need you on YouTube. Yeah. But I totally agree. I mean, I not to speak out of turn, I guess, to Andreas, and to his credit, like he's the reason I got in the first place.
All respect videos. Too, but, for sure.
Yeah, but it's just, I think he doesn't come from the Austrian mindset. He doesn't come from like that fundamental. Maybe I'm wrong, from that fundamental Austrian economics mindset, and he's more of a spending circular economy type, which is great. I think it's important, but I think that's why he gets caught in those shitcoin traps, in a way.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and like I don't. Andreas has written the book on Ethereum as well, obviously. And, Andreas has done so much for the space that like, I don't have any serious criticisms for him because it's balanced by my gratitude for the work that he's put out. But I kind of somewhat tongue in cheek make those, bring up those criticisms I do have because one, they are actually true. But on the other hand, had Andreas decided not to do his speaking at all, then perhaps we all may have been pulled in far later, or who knows? So we can only really judge on what's been put out. But I wish there was at least someone on Twitter who was like, or sorry, on YouTube who was a louder voice for maximalism. Because
I know BTC Sessions is on there, but I think he's more like the news type.
Yeah, and he's definitely a maximalist, but he's a little he's a little Canadian,
yeah. I love him though. I love him.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love him too. And he brings tremendous value to the space. But like, I want someone who's going to get up in your fucking face about going down these wrong roads and wasting time and money. And
you need the clickbait titles and the
exactly. Fight fire with fire sort of thing.
100%.
So you kind of came to the orange side early 18, and then what how did you already had a bit of a libertarian background. What was it that you read that made it click for you, or how did that process unfold?
So I think just personally, the way I learn things is whenever I find something that hooks me in, I just spend like hours and days and weeks just obsessed, downloading every sort of content I can, whether it's books or podcasts like yours or YouTube videos, and I'm just like churning through content. So I think over a short period of time, I went from like multi-coin or blah 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 to reading Bitcoin Standard, even reading like Henry Hazlitt Economic and Lessons, stuff like that. Um, Obviously, getting recommendations from Twitter and things like that.
Yeah.
And then just interacting with people on Twitter and learning that way. I think Twitter's a huge one for sure.
So it wasn't really like a definable click moment. It just kind of happened in a process over time.
I think so. Yeah, I would definitely say I think the only click moment I can think of is the first hook. But after that, it was just a gradual like, okay, multi-coin, Bitcoin, hard money, just bullish, 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 bullish.
Do you get pushback being in the Bay Area for, because it's kind of an epicenter where you get the blockchain types, right? All the VCs for
sure.
blockchain activity. And
dude, I've been to events where I was the only maximalist, and I was respectfully, but arguing like, tell me why you can't do Ethereum stuff on Bitcoin at some point down the future. Maybe not today, but like do it on Liquid, do it on some other layer, because it's the same level of decentralization and security that you're getting on Ethereum, which has, to me, it's not secure compared to a second layer like Liquid. To me, it's the same thing. So why start this whole network when you can just build on that? So anyway, a lot of those kind of debates, and it's really interesting, but there definitely are solid maximalists. I will say, especially people like Alex and his team, Alex Leishman, fantastic maximalists.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are they in the Bay Area? River?
Yeah, they're in San Francisco, from my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's I'm surprised that still in 2020 there's still so much blockchain stuff. But if nothing else, it probably speaks to the fact that much as we ourselves think we're being incredibly, objectively minded and, all that, which I think we are, but that doesn't change the fact that, we create our own echo chamber nonetheless. And, we create our own.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think one thing we do on Twitter, which is kind of bad, and I'm guilty of it as well, is like, for example, Raul Paul will say something crypto, and everyone just piles on him and says, "Oh, shitcoin, this and that." And it's like, I get it. I feel that way too, but maybe he hasn't heard the arguments yet. So I think we should take it a little slowly, maybe sometimes. Yeah.
That's a tricky one to handle, because I know what you're saying, and
yeah,
it goes back to what I was saying about the YouTube stuff. It's like, it is tricky because who knows who's ultimately right or wrong. Obviously, we think we are, but I think many of us just think he's not there yet, but we've seen this journey before, and he just has a lot of influence. So his journey is being pushed through his media channels. But like, I think we've seen this happen before, and people ultimately come back to thinking, Bitcoin is the only thing that deserves, real focus and effort.
Yeah.
And we see him kind of, I think, this is so new to so many people, that just out of pure kind of ignorance and not wanting to, at risk of excluding something that might be a thing, it gets included.
Yes.
And so they and also, from a business perspective, I guess you think, well, if my audience is this big with Bitcoin, then it's this big with crypto, because this includes Bitcoin and everything else, which we may find is not ultimately the case, because many of us won't, we won't tune in to the crypto stuff because it has all that other garbage around it. So who knows? But I take your point, but back to, I think I think it is an echo chamber, but I do think we're right. We just kind of, we're pandering to ourselves, and we're sharpening ourselves. And I think the message is getting out, it's just, it's just taking time. And, as with so many things, people are going to have to get burned. They're going to have to waste their time. They're going to have to waste their money to learn some of the hard lessons. And
I was just going to say, sometimes you just learn the hard way, and then you come back to.
And some people won't learn any other way,
Yeah.
But I think the companies that do focus exclusively on Bitcoin will win a lot of kind of goodwill equity from customers and future customers. And, from a historical perspective, they'll probably benefit reputationally from
Mhm.
having been right, so your companies like Swan and like River and
I think
other
even
Bitcoin.
Unchained, I could be wrong. I
Oh,
think Unchained used to have Ethereum, and now they're just like Bitcoin only.
oh, did they have
Which
Ethereum?
I could be totally wrong. I feel like I remember seeing Ethereum somewhere,
Yeah.
but I love what they're doing. I'm
Oh,
huge
they're
fans of the team.
me
Yeah,
too. They're
yeah,
awesome. And,
yeah.
so companies like that, I think one, they just get to focus all of their resources on Bitcoin, which is a huge
Mhm.
leg up. And I think they'll get to look back and kind of point to the fact that they were right. And all these other companies that got involved in the other crypto stuff, maybe it'll be a blemish on their reputation at some point in the future.
Yeah, and I
Maybe,
think
like,
some of these I think some of these macro guys are they're sort of putting their traditional lens onto Bitcoin in the sense of like we need to diversify. We need to get because we need to get buy gold as money and then buy silver as a speculative asset. Oh, so
right.
let's buy Bitcoin. Let's buy Ethereum. I think that's sort of taking that mindset onto Bitcoin, and maybe that
Yeah.
doesn't really apply.
Yeah, you could be right. I just, from what I've heard from those types of people, um, I just don't think they've gone far enough down the rabbit hole yet. I
Yeah,
think they're
yeah.
far enough down to know there's something really special here and it's really compelling. But to say, like, well, Bitcoin is digital gold, but this is this does this and this does this and this is DeFi and
Yeah.
this is a new financial system. I'm like, no, 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 no. Just keep going. You gave up on the learning too quickly. Like you should have stayed focused and kept going. And so I think that's probably what's happening with a lot of them. And there's so much noise and there's so much money to be made that there's
Hmm.
incentives there as well. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
um, yeah, I can't wait to
I
see
think
how it plays out, over the next few
yeah,
years. Because
totally,
if
totally.
if alts continue to perform as they have since the bubble burst, and Bitcoin keeps kind of moves away, then they'll all probably change their tune pretty quickly.
And I think that's going to happen. I'm really bullish on like personally. I'm not looking to spend too much Bitcoin, so from that sense, Lightning is not super exciting. But Lightning for me is frankly the most exciting because it instantly takes away the selling point of so many shit coins. It's fast and private. So now
Yeah,
you've killed two categories of shit coins.
yeah,
So I think as we get more and more layers, I think we're just going to kill more and more coins. So yeah,
yeah, and then Bitcoin's own innovation will continue apace, and it's
100%.
it's it's hard just to keep up with that. There's so many cool things going on, whether it's companies in the space or whether it's actual, innovation on base layer or Lightning, and um, like like I said in that interview that you referenced before we started recording, like
Yeah.
keeping we have to be conservative with this, keeping the main, recognizing how important it is to have that base layer be ironclad is paramount. And the people that don't recognize the importance of that try to move too quickly and go on to other things and functions, clearly they don't get it.
I feel like we have one shot, man. Like
Right.
we can't screw up with like a shitty unsecure network and then just whoops,
Yeah, I think that
can't
could
do
be.
that.
I
So
think that could very well be the case. That there's one kick at the can at this, and we're so lucky, and it's almost like a miracle that it maneuvered its early days the way that it did to wind up, to not have faltered or failed in the early days, because that's when it was obviously most susceptible to doing so. And just by a turn of fate, by something like that, it persisted, and I think it got out of the hairy part where it could have been derailed fairly easily to the point now where it's probably would be very difficult to
kind of
derail it.
inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be overly hubristic about it, but it's like, I don't see how this doesn't, do what we think it's
Yeah.
going to do. The timeline is the thing in question, but how does this not keep going?
Yeah, no, I think it's super fun. And one thing I've been experimenting with is from like a personal finance perspective is I put a tweet about this the other day about like how to sort of short the dollar, right? it like in this one, in like 2 or 3 steps, right? You want to, number one, um, take out a residential loan on a single, double, 3 or 4plex. So you get the 30-year fixed rate loan. Now, as inflation, I'm pretty sure inflation is going to pump up over the next 5, 6 years, right? So you've locked in that fixed rate. Now you have equity in a cash flowing rental property. You're getting cash flow. Now you put the cash flow in Bitcoin. Bitcoin pumps. You buy more rental properties. And I really think if you're trying to short the dollar, I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that personally.
Is that what you're doing?
That's what I'm looking into right now. So I'm looking at properties in the Midwest. So Cleveland, Indianapolis, they have very high cash flow and they're really cheap. So
yeah, man, you should write about that, because I'm sure there'd be a lot of people interested in maybe doing something similar.
Yeah.
Because the name of the game right now is to stack sats, right? It's
100%.
That's the other thing that's so funny. It's like people outside of this space, like we're on such a different way of thinking about this that it's hard to relate, right? Because we know that right now is the time to stake your territory, right?
100%.
Because it's a relatively well kept secret still, and yeah, just the fact that there's that even at this point there's not so many more people recognizing that and trying to do the same is wild to me. But I'm not upset about it, because it gives us more time, basically.
And someone else that I don't know if you've spoken to him, Preston Pish. I love Preston. I'm a huge Preston fan.
Yeah, I had him on.
He talks about measuring equities like priced in gold or priced in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I think pricing in Bitcoin might be a little too extreme, but pricing in gold for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like look at the S&P price in gold. I mean, it's not, we're not in a bull market. So I would encourage anyone listening to do that. That's very interesting.
So Preston's awesome, and I've noticed over the last 6 months especially that, because he used to be like a measured sort of guy, like he comes from the traditional world, and he talks about, and you were kind of like, oh wow, like this guy who's kind of really in the traditional world, but he gets Bitcoin, he likes Bitcoin, it's a part of his portfolio. But over the last like 6 to 9 months, he's so bullish, like on every pod that he goes on. He's basically a hyper bull, and he's going harder on Twitter these days too. So I love it. He's a great guy.
And there are some people who are just kind of like mindlessly bullish. They're just like, oh, Bitcoin pump. He really, really gets the fundamentals of why Bitcoin and not other cryptocurrencies are like the thing. He really, really gets it. So
yeah.
He
makes reference to the stock to flow a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't really go and talk about it. Like, I don't tell people about it. Like, oh, this is the stock to flow. Buy now because it's going to be more expensive. Personally, I'm like, I think it's going to happen. Whether it's because the purchasing price goes up to like 300K, or it's just because the dollar inflates to 300K. I think it's probably going to happen. But I don't know if I would recommend anyone trade against that.
Right.
But I like it.
Yeah, I certainly hope it's right too. You bring up an interesting point about denominating, the S&P returns in something other than the USD, right? Or something other than fiat currency. So gold or Bitcoin. But as you say, that's maybe a little bit much right now. But it makes me think about how the next few years will play out, right? Because I think there's one method, the one perspective that you look at it and you say, there's so much intervention, there's so much misallocation of capital that is going to cause so much disruption that it won't be able to be kind of managed, and the spinning top will become more and more erratic until something breaks, whether it's price signals of goods, or whether it's insolvencies, or whether it's whatever. But the stock market now is so much used for a proxy on the health of the economy. And that's what all the politicians point to. It's what the talking heads and the media point to, everybody. That, as I feel like, will the facade be able to be maintained for the common person as long as the stock market is pumping? Because as we've seen in Venezuela, you can make the stock market pump even when the economy
in
is
nominal terms.
Tatters. Yeah, in nominal terms. Like the man on the street is absolutely decimated, and the inflation is rampant, and store shelves are empty, but the stock market's going well. And you could already make the case that in the US that process is underway. I mean, look how many people are, live, on food stamps, for example, or homeless people, or just the degree of inequality that's being generated by this system. And my God, surely a lot more is going to be condensed now as a result of the activities of the Fed and the government in the last, 3-4 months, because you basically got like 10 years of intervention in the span of
Jeez.
those short months. And
Yeah.
if that way of operating creates inequality over a 10-year time period, and you've just condensed it down into 3 months, what kind of inequality will that breed? So you could make the case, and I'm sure you saw the Jim Cramer shot where it was,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
record unemployment,
Uh,
stock markets nearing records. So we're already seeing that that's playing out. So I wonder if over the next like 5 or so years, instead of this big collapse that maybe some of us had anticipated or saw as a potential outcome before, it just, the facade keeps ripping as the real world keeps falling apart. But because what everybody is looking at to judge on, to assess things is,
the
in
nominal number going
nominal
up. Yeah.
metrics good,
Yeah.
then is everything going to get swept under the rug in terms of recognizing how broken things are?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think part of the reason why Americans in particular are so look at the stock market for everything is because obviously, I mean, this is nothing mind blowing, but like the dollar is being debased constantly. So you put it in the S&P 500 index fund, and your 401k is now in the stock market as well. So my guess is like middle class, upper middle class people are gonna be pacified for a while,
Yeah.
exactly like you said. But I'm pretty sure, I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm pretty sure the lower class of people don't have that much stake in the equity market. So yeah, I
That's
think
what I'm
things are going to
saying.
get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, for those people, they get so they get so hurt in times like these, because as you say, if you're a middle class person, maybe you don't get the bonus, or whatever happens at work. But if you've been kind of financially responsible for most of your life, and you've got
Yeah.
some 401k, maybe you own a house, maybe you got some some other assets, some cash, maybe it sucks, but maybe life goes on and you continue to kind of trend upward. But for those people that are strictly in cash with no assets and no equities or anything like that, I mean, this crushes them. And let's not
And
fool.
now get, oh, go
Go
ahead. Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you
No,
go.
I was going to say, and if you layer this, well, what I'm going to say next on top of it, it's going to, like, you're going to get really pissed. So George Gammon talks about, I don't know if you talked to George Gammon, but he talks about, and a lot of people talk about this, but the how we measure inflation, right? This CPI measurement,
Yeah.
it's constantly being changed, and it's
Yeah.
constantly under measuring what inflation actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So it hurts the poor even more, right? They don't own any assets. They're owning cash. The cost of living is constantly going up, but their social security and other things that are pegged to inflation, those aren't actually including minimum wage or whatever. That's not being properly increased by the real rate of inflation. So yeah, it really makes me angry.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah,
George, I
yeah,
saw George's piece on CPI. I haven't had him on the pod yet, though I'd certainly be love to. Great video though, and actually
100%.
off the back of that video, and kind of with what's going on, I'm sitting down hopefully next week with Gene Epstein, because I want to do a pod just on the CPI, the history on the CPI,
Nice.
how it's calculated, and how it's used as a policy instrument, because it's instrumental as a policy instrument in so many different ways to cover over the impact of what the Federal Reserve does.
Even your tax brackets, like
Right,
sure,
right,
your
right.
tax rate's going down, but you're being pushed up constantly into that higher tax bracket quietly. And it's,
Yeah,
yeah. And the thing is, the rich are going to find ways around this. So
yeah,
like the rich are building businesses, they're buying rental properties. Rental properties are essentially tax-free income.
mhm.
So the rich are going to find the way around it. The poor are not going to pay much tax, and the middle class is just getting hammered.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah,
So like basically the rich use cash as a means of transferring one asset to another, right?
yeah,
I sell a property, I move into equity. I sell bonds, I move into whatever. So, it's very, temporary, their cash position most often.
yeah,
And obviously that affords them a huge advantage over people who can't do that. but still, it that's kind of a temporary okay for them, because ultimately they can do that, and they won't get as harmed as much as the people that don't have that option and are forced to basically only save in cash. But they've, the economy can't continue to grow healthy based on that. So even the assets that they're accumulating, there's got to be a limit to the real increase in value represented in them. Nominally, yes, they may go up for a while, but the real value that either their cash flow assets are generating, or the net value of whatever assets, like if the economy is being destroyed, there's a limit to uh, to them being able to continue to grow, I guess, their wealth through those methods.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Yeah.
And about the inequality piece, let's not kid ourselves. Whatever your feelings are about Black Lives Matter initiatives,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
like any other social movement, of which there seems to have been many over the last few years,
Hmm.
hugely uh, influenced by these things that we're discussing. It's not on the surface because most people aren't aware of the relationship
Hmm.
between, economic disparity, the causes of that disparity, and how that disparity influences these social issues. But underlying a lot of it is just frustration, angst, and anger. And and
100%.
and if that's your base layer, then all you're waiting for is an issue to latch onto that's relevant
And
to you.
in a way, it's kind of understandable. Like, I mean,
Totally is.
definitely wouldn't back it up, but it's kind of understandable. Like, if things are going so horribly and things are so unfair, but you can't point the finger as to why.
Right.
You say, oh, problems here, problem there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and you look for the, like, what seems to be
yes,
the most righteous finger pointing you can do,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
there's a finger point in you
yeah,
somewhere, and I think, like you said, like there should be, but absent an understanding of what's going on and where that finger should be pointed, you kind of just jump on the first one that makes sense, like, oh, fucking injustice there, or inequality there, or unfairness, or
exactly.
whatever. And that's, as you say, I totally understand it, but it is a bit of a tragedy, because how much will we tear down before we come to realize the core underlying causes of these things? Do we have to destroy everything before we realize that wasn't what we were supposed to be destroying in the first place?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question, and I think as much as I think Bitcoin does fix this at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be like a 5-year fix. Like, because when it's pumping to $1 million, a lot of people are going to be. It's going to contribute to that same wealth inequality myth. Not myth, but the same wealth inequality narrative, right?
Oh, it'll be
Oh,
it'll
these
be
people got.
huge FUD, man. Huge.
Yeah. So maybe 50 years down the line, Bitcoin fixes this. I agree, but it's tough, man. It's
Yeah,
tough.
we're
It's
we're
gonna be
gonna
it's gonna
have
get hard.
yeah, it is. We're gonna have
Yeah.
some serious FUD to contend with. I think maybe the environmental FUD won't be so bad because
Mm,
of the renewable component of Bitcoin mining and some
true.
of the
True.
cool innovations happening there. But still, it'll probably be a little bit. But I think the inequality one will be huge, because let's be real. If we're right, then the
Yeah.
Bitcoiners are going to be rich, and everyone else is going to be left behind, at least in that domain. And there'll be a ton of people who'll be salivating, chomping at the bit to tell that story, and to build that narrative. And
So as you're saying that, I'm actually just realizing that. So my license plate in my car is Bitcoin related. It's a stack sats. Now I'm kind of reconsidering. I'm like, maybe I should take
it's
that
not
down
very good
before the next go
OPSEC, but I
around.
like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had to STK, SATS. I was like, I had to do it. Yeah. Yeah. I'll send you a picture later.
No, yeah, please do. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think this is why there's been discussion on Twitter about this might be the heyday of Bitcoin Twitter, because we're probably, when things really pop off, we're probably all going to fade into the background a little bit more. And
Yeah.
because we're not going to want the attention. And I know,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
I say all this, I understand I'm presupposing that we're correct, but let's just like assume that we are. Um, yeah, I think we may get a lot of that kind of unwanted attention, but at the same time, some of us are going to have to take it, right? Because I think some of us will be compelled to engage in those debates and try to try to represent the other side, try to represent the side of truth, and try to explain to people, what this really is and what it represents. But it's going to be
Yep.
hard, because you're going to have to just straight up tell people, you missed the boat a little bit. As much as we've been shouting it from the rooftops and to anybody who's willing to listen for over a decade, you will have missed out. But the thing about Bitcoin is it's never too late. It's never, it's always beneficial to begin operating and holding Bitcoin.
It sounds like a scam, but I think Matt Odell says it really well. Like, Bitcoin's designed to pump forever. In a way, I think that's true personally.
Yeah. I guess I have to understand what he means by pump, but I agree with the sentiment, but it does sound super scammy, right? It just sounds like something a scam artist would say.
Yeah. I guess there's nuance in pump. Yeah.
And I'm not saying Matt is, obviously. I love Matt. But yeah, man, this is going to be the stuff that we have to contend with. And I'm just hoping that I'm super encouraged by the amount of stuff that's come out over the last 2 years, especially, the number of voices and all sorts of different content. Like, I'm blown away by the level of writers and thinkers and, that we have in this space. It's almost unparalleled. It's remarkable. And what's great about it is most people aren't credentialed. They're not, reputed people from any specific industry. They seem to just be clear thinking people, or people attempting to think as clearly as possible and articulate as clearly as possible their thoughts, thinking, insights on this thing. Yeah. And turns out when enough people do that, and you keep bouncing things, you come to a point where people have some pretty unique thoughts, and we all get to benefit from them. It's remarkable.
100%. Yeah. It's and not just people in education, but I think even products. Like, if you look at Strike, which isn't announced yet from Jack Mallers, well, isn't launched yet from Jack Mallers. I think those kind of products are the ones that are really, really gonna just change things forever. Like Strike, for example, I don't know how Jack did it, but he somehow, like, people think of UX and product design as like, oh, the visuals and stuff but I think Jack took it to another level where he was like, what do people actually want to do with Bitcoin in terms of spending? Oh, people don't want to spend their Bitcoin. They want to spend their fiat, and they want to stack sats. So let me find a way I can spend fiat, but spend it to a Bitcoin wallet. Oh, wow, that makes sense. Let me do that. So I think that stuff like that is just mind blowing to me.
I gotta know how that works under the hood, because it seems too good to be true or something.
It really does. I'm holding out hope. But yeah, it does sound too good to be true. Yeah.
Jack is an amazing dude, man. I've got a ton of respect for him.
Totally.
So when the opportunity arises, what kind of involvement do you want to have in the space? Doing similar line of work that you're doing now?
Yeah. So I think my strengths are sort of around that product area. So whether it's product design or product management, things like that. Nothing super formal, but I love thinking from the user point of view, but like that intersection of like the business goals, user, and stuff like that. How do you work on that? So it kind of applies to really any product. You could look at Casa, you could look at River, you could look at on-chain capital.
Yeah. Have you talked to people in the space yet to try to dip your toes in the water?
Yeah, I'm starting to do that. I haven't really explored too much. Blockstream would be great. I would love to work at Blockstream. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's
super
cool.
Just got to hustle, and eventually maybe you'll get someone's attention.
Yeah. Blockstream is, they've always been a really cool company. Have they put out the satellite kits yet? Like, are they available for retail yet?
I heard they just launched the kit recently, I think in the last month or so.
Yeah, but they did. Well, they said they did, but I didn't see it available on their website. So I think maybe they pre-announced it or something like that.
Sure.
But my understanding is that it's going to be because before they would kind of have the how-to about how to set up the satellite node. And I think this is hopefully going to be kind of an all-in-one package, which would be super cool.
That would be super cool. Yeah. I would love to have that. Yeah.
Don't you ever just think how awesome it is that there's all these people all around the world who are like building the infrastructure and participating in, a mass movement to take, financial sovereignty and the other sovereignties that leads to for themselves. And they're tinkering and they're using these new tools and they're fucking up and they're learning and they're getting better, like just all over the world. This is, so many people are motivated to take the time and the expense to do all this. It's incredible.
It's crazy. And I really think, and I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but like, I really think working on Bitcoin and working on bringing sound money to the world is like the most noble thing you can do today, because
100%.
it's like one of those 80-20 principle things, like Pareto principle.
Yeah.
What is the least amount of focused work you can do for the maximum output? And I really think focusing on Bitcoin and making Bitcoin, bringing sound money back to the world, that's going to have like ripple effects across society, whether it's like autonomous cars or space travel or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's why I'm personally so excited about working on Bitcoin.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, man. It's just too compelling to ignore and to not engage in. Do you, you mentioned this a bit earlier, but what kind of course, nobody knows, but when you envision the future, the next 5, 10, 20 years, what kind of a timeline do you see this all playing out on?
So, I still feel like, do you mean in terms of like number go up, or in terms of,
I guess,
just
number go up,
the ripple effects,
adoption, global acceptance, whatever, just what this narrative, this Bitcoin narrative, how do you see it playing out over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years?
I feel like, just talking from like a macro perspective, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I feel like we've been pulling productivity for so long. We've been pulling productivity to the left because through inflation, right? We've just been, starting more businesses quickly, even if they were non-productive or not really useful. We've been pulling productivity this way. I think there's going to be some sort of like just slowdown period where things are consolidating back into a saving society rather than a lending or spending society. I feel like there's going to be a period. There has to. I think there just has to be. Maybe 10, 20 years, and then after that we get back to like proper allocation of resources.
Yeah, I sometimes envision, a Bitcoin denominated future as being a far, not basic, but a far simpler world.
Yeah.
Like I do think that sounder money and the incentives structure, the incentives that permits or inspires, and the prohibition on the levels of intervention and corruption or coercion that it represents will have really positive impacts. And I do think we will kind of accelerate in the technology sphere. But I think of myself and I think of other Bitcoiners that I talk to, and I can't think of any exceptions to this right now. I'm sure there are some, but they live pretty austere lives.
Sure.
And now that could be because they're so focused on stacking sats, but I also think it's because, they kind of recognize the ultimate like worthlessness of just having so many different material goods, and their focus seems to be directed towards things of genuine, real value. And this means,
I think that's true.
Yeah. And so this means relationships. This means, time spent in nature. This means pursuing things, that they find meaningful. This means investing in and engaging in quality. And so if that's the case, then I see, certainly possible that we see, far, I guess, less diverse global product offering, because like all the garbage that gets produced for the fast consumption sort of attitude, that will diminish dramatically and will shift toward fewer things, but of far higher quality, of far higher utility, and then coinciding with perhaps, far more concentrated and rewarding investment in innovation and technology. So I see a far simpler kind of day-to-day life with, coupled with far greater uses of technology, I guess.
Totally. And I think that stems from, getting a loan or loaning, getting a loan in fiat denominated terms is a great idea. It's fantastic, because why not? The money's going to debase. But getting
Right.
a loan denominated in a hard money like gold or Bitcoin, that's where the wisdom of the ancients come in, and they say, don't, whatever the phrase is, like, don't be a borrower or something like that. That's said because when you borrow in a hard money, it just gets harder and harder to pay back over time.
Right.
So I think we're just going to be in a Bitcoin world or in a hard money world. You just, as you said, you save up for a quality item, whether it's your car or your desk or whatever. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the cheap, low quality stuff goes away. So hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's inescapable, the degree of, well, maybe I should just, I'll ask you, what,
Yeah.
if any, kind of ways have you changed either your consumption or your
Mhm.
perspective on spending or your any other form of behavior since really going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole? Has any of that changed for you?
So I think I've generally always been kind of a high saver, like, in the sense, like, I use a budgeting software, so I'm super like,
One of those.
yeah, yeah, I put like every dollar has a job for me, so I can stack as many stacks as possible, like, to the cent. But
Nice,
but but
nice.
but it is true that whenever I go and buy something, I think, wait a second, I could be buying like $20 worth of Bitcoin with this. And it sounds kind of cliche, but it's really is true, and it sounds so nerdy, I know, but it
Oh
really is
man,
true.
I'm 100% with you. No,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
preaching to the choir.
yeah, yeah. I think it's great. I think it's a good habit personally. So
Oh, of course. But what about, we talk about other behavior changes in the space,
mhm.
whether it's regarding health, whether it's regarding relationships, whether it's regarding, the work you do, anything like that. Has any of that shifted for you, like your mindset on that stuff?
I think one thing is like family related. I think maybe it's just as you get older, you start to think in that mindset of
Yeah.
uh, not just the far future of passing on to generations, but even just your immediate family of your parents and your future kids and things like that. I think it's a cliche of like the low time preference thinking, but I really think it is true.
Yeah.
The more and more you start thinking about it. Yeah.
I also think it's, and all, of course, this is multifactorial, but
Mhm.
I think it's very sensibly you could also make a case that a lot of people, we grow up in this culture and a lot is made of kind of the hedonistic elements of the culture. And so people are,
Mhm.
live for the moment. They prioritize pleasure, experience, gratification, this kind of stuff. And this has led to, if not a breakdown, but let's say a decrease in the popularity of the nuclear family, right? So people
Mhm.
are just like, I want to live free, have fun, do whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, many reasons, but certainly must be in part because of the high time preference behavior that a fiat system inspires, right? And it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
insidious in the different ways that it does that. And then,
Exactly. It really is subliminal, I think. Yeah.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And then you go to a hard money system. And for those of us who are engaged in Bitcoin, we see how hard that is and we understand the implications. Well, then you start to think, if you were one of those kind of immediate gratification people, like one of the reasons was you probably didn't see, the future was very murky. It was just this soup of experience and, struggle and impermanence and all that kind
Mhm.
of stuff.
Mhm.
And then, you come to engage with Bitcoin and you start to see the future as, solid, and, you can begin to have confidence in it, and you can
Yeah.
begin to see, hope for the future. And when that picture starts emerging in your mind, well, then it's far easier for your mind to also emerge and, kind of put into that picture a family, that you may have, because it's a more secure environment for something like that to take place. Like, you may have
Yeah.
not been inspired to bring, to start a family in a world that seemed far more chaotic and uncertain and whatever.
Mhm.
But if a world seems, like it's going to be that much better,
Yeah. Yeah.
and will have a long-term future, and, will be able to support you and will have opportunity and all of these things, well, then thinking that you might want to have a family in that, it just seems like it's a much easier sell effectively.
Yeah. I don't think I could have put that better myself. Like, I think that's an example of one of the ripple effects, right? It's just once you get sound money back, I think we should all be just focused on getting sound money back, and
Yeah.
then all this stuff sort of gets ironed out, I think. But,
Well, that's what's frustrating about, all the movements these days. It's like
mhm.
there's truth, there's a level of truth to almost all of them, right?
Yes, yeah,
There's, and I've never said otherwise. But
mhm,
if we just all took that level of energy and that level of passion and
mhm,
fixed the main problem first, and and got that done, and then saw how the other symptoms of that core problem maybe by default or automatically improved as a result of doing that, and to the extent that they then aren't improved to the degree that we want them to be, then we can work on them, then we
yeah,
can bring attention to them. But just focusing all this disparate attention this week that way, this week that way, on these far more symptomatic, I would
mhm.
say, issues, like it solves nothing. We
And
get
I
token
think,
resolution.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's an example where like maybe localism comes into play where um personally I'm talking to the people around me and my family, my friends, my immediate community, whenever they bring up one of these issues, I'm like, I agree with you that this is a problem, but hey, let's focus 80/20 principle, right? Let's focus on this first.
Yeah.
And whether that's your community or your podcast or whatever, I think the more we do that, the more it spreads. Yeah,
100%. But the
yeah,
challenge is spinning the thread from the thing that they're focused on back to the sound money, because most people don't see the connection. What the hell does police brutality have to do with Bitcoin?
true,
Or what the
true.
hell does police brutality have to do with sound money? And it's for people that are not primed at all for that message. It's an involved conversation to elucidate all the different variables that link the two.
And it's hard. It's hard to refine your pitch. I mean, like it takes probably years of like just constantly explaining the same things.
Well, that
Yeah,
you're
right.
right.
So
And I mean, this is part of the reason why I started the podcast, right? Because these conversations that happen socially or in family settings, like, it's not the best setting, because
mhm.
you don't want to upset the apple cart sometimes, and you don't want to turn it into this, big, serious discussion about whatever, because rarely
Yeah,
is the circumstance and the context set up for that, and people's attention span is limited, and blah blah blah. And so having, a podcast that you get to really dig into these things, and then people
yes.
can choose to look into it if you like, or you can direct them there, I find is a far better approach. But um, the simple fact, man, is that a lot of people just, they don't actually care what the truth is. I mean, if I'm average Joe,
Hmm.
like, it's just easier for me to say, yeah, of course, Black Lives Matter, great movement. I
Hmm.
hope, Black people get the justice they deserve.
Hmm. Hmm.
Fully on board. Great. Moving on. Like, what are we having for dinner? And that's just, it's easier for me. It makes my life easier. It doesn't apparently, like, it doesn't cost me anything. At least
Sure, sure.
I don't see the cost to me that having that approach exerts. And so why not? Why try to figure out what the ultimate cost of
I
this thing
think I think even there though, if we go back to finding that hook and also shilling lightly, as Matt Odell puts it, like shill lightly and find that hook.
is?
I
Yeah.
think if we find that hook, even with this guy, this theoretical guy you're talking about, maybe his hook is number go up. I mean, for most people, let's be
Oh,
honest,
of course.
that's a great hook. But
Yeah.
for some people, I'll give you an example. I have a family member who is very much into all this protesting stuff. So they downloaded Signal, and I was like, wow, great. Okay, they're on Signal now.
Right.
So I think your hook can be different things, as long as the outcome is okay. You're using end-to-end encryption, or you're making this bring sound money to the world. I think we just need to find that hook for whoever it is and show lightly.
I,
Yeah.
I I totally agree about finding the hook. The only, I guess, caveat there is,
Hmm.
can we afford to have people can we afford to wait for people to kind of uh, well, I don't know. What happens if we just allow people to kind of find the hook eventually, rather than trying to,
Accelerate it.
yeah, accelerate it a little bit? And I get the shill lightly part, and sometimes I shill lightly, and sometimes I shill real hard. But as you say, man,
Yeah,
nobody,
yeah,
the NGU tech is the
yeah.
most compelling for 99% of people. Sometimes I just think, you know what? I'm shutting everything down. No more
Yeah.
intellectual conversations, whatever. And I'm going to be the Carlos Matos of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Hey, hey, hey,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stage. And like,
Yeah.
but what I'll be shilling in my super scammy snake oil salesman type of way is
Yeah.
Bitcoin. And, you know, if it pumps and I get like tons of people on board, then, you know, my job is done. They got their foot in the door and they can start, you know, paying more attention as a result of having some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Because you're right. That's the pump is what brings most people in for sure.
I think that's fair. I'm excited to see what like 100K brings us, 100K, 200K, and then it drops back down to 40K, and that's our new baseline. It's like 40K, and people are like,
Yeah.
oh, Bitcoin died. It's 40K. Yeah, yeah,
Well, that's, I mean, you know, in the last cycle, that's what people were laughing about. You know,
exactly.
people that gotten in prior to the last cycle, like, oh,
Yeah,
really? It died at 3,000? Are you joking? You know,
yeah,
that only a few months ago, that was an all-time high.
yeah. So
Um,
Pierre actually woke me up to this, like holding Bitcoin as a cash balance. So you're holding cash to hedge against uncertainty. So I don't really have a reason to hold dollars, to be honest, because depending on what your time scale is, your time horizon, just hold Bitcoin as cash. What's wrong with that? I mean, even if you're holding it for emergencies,
oh, it has so many benefits, you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
ultimately the case for it is going to be so strong. You know, maybe you hold it as an investment, you hold it as a
hmm
cash balance, you hold it as the, you know, the best collateral around, you hold it as, you
yeah.
know, I mean, it's just going to do so many things that, you know, that's why we stack as hard as we stack, I guess. Um, I
Hey,
wonder where, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. No, one thing I wanted to bring up really quick, if you still have time,
Sure.
is multi-sig. I'm curious, uh, maybe not you personally, or just in the people you've spoken to, where's multi-sig at personally with you and the people you talk to?
Well, the
Like
only
people
one
use it.
who I've really talked about with it thus far and kind of limited was Parker from Unchained. You know,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
they have Caravan, and Caravan is just a super easy way to engage in multisig. As
100%.
as far as where thing, you know, obviously people use it as part of their security setup in certain instances. Um, Other than that, I mean, I haven't read much on how, like, you know, how it's being used, and
hmm
so much of this I think is like for those of us who run nodes, you know, mess around with multi-sig, you know, that already puts us in a very small category,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, group of people, because the vast majority of people who own Bitcoin, I mean, so many people still hold it on exchanges, for God's sake,
yeah,
you know, and then there's another massive contingent that just have a hardware wallet set up, and you know, that's how they secure their Bitcoin. And not to
yeah,
disparage that, but like that's a huge portion of people too.
totally.
You know, very few people run nodes and very few people take it beyond that. So I don't know. Like I don't have, it's not my general inclination to be like the uber tech tinkerer, like
Oh,
some of the
sure.
people in the space that just really maximize what the tech can do.
hmm
um, and I try to, you know, I'm definitely not like the depths of the tech rabbit hole type of person, right? I'm far
Sure.
higher up on the rungs to maybe kind of like get people in.
Yeah.
But I don't know, how do you use multi-sig, or what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the reason I brought it up was because I really feel like whenever I hear, so custodial is one thing, right? And then like you said, maybe you have a Trezor or a cold card with a single signature that you back up your seed somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, maybe it's just me, but at some level, that second option of the single sig with the backup, that almost makes me more worried than the custodial option because I feel like user error is the potential for user error is so high.
Yeah, it
Like
doesn't get
you
talked
write
about
down your
enough.
seed. Yeah, you write down your seed, you lost it somewhere, and now your Trezor stops working. I mean, the chances are pretty low of that. But I really think the emergence of user-friendly multi-sig solutions, I spend most of my free time just thinking about that. It's like I'm super, super bullish on that, including Caravan.
You've messed
Um,
around with Caravan?
yeah, yeah. So I'm actually writing a guide. I'm probably going to release it pretty soon, like a written guide on how you can use Caravan. MyNode, if you've used MyNode before, it's just the node in the
Yeah,
box.
I use mine. That's great.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
and then just 5 hardware wallets. So you get 5 hardware wallets, you get your MyNode, and you get Caravan. And now you got this super easy multi-sig setup. And yeah, I really think more people should look at multi-sig for securing their funds.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's going to be so many other applications for multi-sig, and it's just
Yeah.
one. There's Bitcoin is going to do so fucking much. It's crazy, but there's just out of multi-sig alone, there's going to be a lot of great applications. But I think you make a good point, which gets glossed over a lot in that because we kind of nerd out and say like we kind of try to one up each other on like what's the best security approach, right?
Yeah.
Until you're at full Glacier protocol and it's all
Jeez,
this
yeah.
craziness. And you're right, like user error is probably your biggest security threat.
Yeah.
I mean, even versus having your keys on exchange, like really,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
there's a debate to be made there. But let's say like with a professional custodian or something, right? Like your BitGos, your Knox custodies, your whatever the hell else there is. Like, I'm sure more Bitcoin have been lost by user error than they've lost due to whatever negligence, hacking, whatever.
Sure. Yeah,
Sure.
I think the best thing with anything else in Bitcoin is there's optionality, right? Like whatever level you are, you can do Glacier, you can do Casa, you can do whatever. So
and Jan Pritzker, who CTO at Swan, wrote Inventing Bitcoin. After I'm sure you saw the story of Eric having lost his Bitcoin from the Keep Key thing, which whatever, but Jan commented on that saying exactly this, like it's user error is underestimated, and even if that's not the only variable you're considering, perhaps a wiser approach would be to spread out your security a little bit and not
100%.
Basically keep all your eggs in one basket. And he even said yes, perhaps for a portion with a third-party custodian, just maybe a small amount,
spread your risk.
Yeah, a little bit, and everyone has to find what jives with their ideology and stuff like that. And I totally see if a third-party custodian is not part of that, but just the point that maybe taking a few approaches is sensible.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, 100%.
Anything else on your mind that you want to touch on?
Anything else? That's kind of what I've been thinking about. Really, with Bitcoin, it's just that it's like macro, multi-sig, Bitcoin UX.
When's this piece going to be coming out? This guide to multi-sig?
Yeah, so I actually sent it to a few people, including some of the guys at Unchained, just to get like a draft, like a review. So I'm hoping this week. I'm kind of busy with work.
Oh,
these days,
sick!
but
Nice.
Yeah, I would love to get it out because just even if it helps one person just set up multi-sig without doing all the Glacier crazy stuff, like that would be amazing to me. So,
but are they going to have to buy 5 hardware wallets to do that?
I would say that's probably the best way to do it. So you're probably going to be at the end of the day, you just need XPubs and you need to be able to sign. So it doesn't have to be a hardware wallet, but you probably want to store your seeds either on a hardware wallet, or you could do like get a offline laptop with Ubuntu and all that kind of stuff. You could do that as well, but the hardware wallet is probably going to be easier. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, look, I appreciate you sliding into my DMs tonight and jumping on this call. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm sure we'll talk again, perhaps mid bull run when things change and maybe you've 100%. Made the changeover. But hit me up when you put out that piece, because I'll definitely shill it and pump it out to my audience.
Awesome. Hey, this was super fun. Thanks for getting me on.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
See ya.
See you, man. Take care.